I have another reaction video for you, and this week we decided to do a live stream, so I'm live reacting to it, and also the live stream picked the video we're going to be discussing, and this is the switch and click follow-up about trying Fedora. So let's jump in.
This is my Dell XPS from 2021. Last month, I tried out Linux for the first time as I was trying to revive it from the dead state, where it would get stuck on the boot screen and just shut off over and over again. And surprisingly, it worked. I did it. So I shared my experience in a video where many of you congratulated me for trying Linux out. But many of you also said that Mint, the version of Linux that most resembles Windows, was the wrong choice, that it's ugly and outdated, that Fedora is the best version of Linux. Especially,
I mean, Mint is fine. Like for most people, it's fine. Is Fedora good? Yes, absolutely, it's good too. That's one of the things I don't like about the responses. People say like, "Oh, you shouldn't use this distro. You should use this distro." You know, that sort of stuff. If someone finds a distro that they like and they enjoy it and it works and all that, then it's fine for them to just keep using that one. But let's see where it happens this one.
Since I use a Mac as my main work computer. Hence, my strange choice of headgear for this video, my lady. Then I started thinking, Mint is a bit old school looking. Did I make a mistake? Is Fedora really the best? Or is the grass always going to be greener on the other side? So I challenged myself. Could I replace my Mac, my main workstation, for an entire work week with Fedora without going back? This is a serious escalation from just using Linux as a side piece. I'll be using it for almost everything now. It's sort of scary. Nonetheless, I'm going into this with an open mind. After all, I don't want to master Linux in just a day or even just a month. I want to experience it like anyone else would, which means starting from zero and figuring out what I like and don't like one distro at a time. So after downloading, installing, and using Mint for well over a month, I'm basically a Linux expert at this point, right? Oh boy, was I wrong. When you open up the Fedora website, you're met with words that look like they come from another planet. But look, it's officially on version 42. Is this a sign that this is the answer to the meaning of life and the universe?
Yes. I actually made a video about the release of Fedora 42, and I also could not help myself from making the Hitchhiker's Guide joke because, I mean, you have to. You have to. But yes, there are some things. So she was talking about how there's some terms that are used that, x86, AMD x86 64. Yeah, so they're not going to know what this means. And also the fact that there's not like an NVIDIA version. So what if they have NVIDIA? That's kind of confusing. They might think that they can't use it because it says Intel and AMD. That's kind of confusing. They should just say, desktop edition, or not desktop edition, but like I don't know. It's hard to, I know why they're doing it because x86 64 is the name of it, but most people don't know that. In PowerPC, most people don't know that either. So, and the ARM thing, at least some distros just say ARC64, and I'm glad that they actually put the ARM there. But the Intel and AMD, I know that this is for the CPUs only, and that's why they don't put NVIDIA. But it's just for it might be confusing anyway to some people, just because of the terms and using the same. AMD being the same for both the CPU and the GPU and that sort of stuff. So it might throw some people off. Maybe not, but I get the reason, the concern.
You're met with words that look like they come from another planet. But look, it's officially on version 42.
I didn't notice the dancing alien the first time. That was good.
Is this a sign that this is the answer to the meaning of life and the universe? This seems reassuring though. It's been through so many iterations. That means all the bugs must be squashed out already. So let's just get Fedora. Oh no, not this again. Getting Fedora isn't as easy as clicking a link and downloading it. There's actually many versions of Fedora. There's Workstation, KDE Plasma. That one sounds like a cool weapon. And there's a server that runs on bare metal. Is that a euphemism for something? You also have the cloud, Core OS, and IoT, Internet of Things. And after reading all the pages explaining what each one was for, I'm stuck between Workstation, the Linux desktop you've been waiting for, and KDE Plasma. the next generation personal desktop. Now, I would love a which Fedora is right for you quiz, but if there's one thing I learned about Linux users, myself included, it's that we like the struggle. We don't want the answers handed out to us like free candy. No, we like to be in control of our own decisions, and for me, that meant choosing between beautiful and customizable. Ooh, which one? But how do I make that decision? Well, apparently KDE Plasma is a DE, also known as a desktop environment, and Workstation is based off Gnome, another DE. A DE is basically the visual part of interacting with your computer.
So a couple of things. First of all, as far as like the customizable and beautiful, I mean, beautiful is also a subjective relative thing, but like I think KDE Plasma 6 looks very good. I don't think the default bright theme of the panels and stuff is great, but the dark version I'm a big fan of, and the way that Fedora ships it, which is the Twilight mode, where it is dark panels and dark menus and stuff, but also bright windows. I think that's the best hybrid approach. So I think either one of them would still count as beautiful. And if you modify Gnome enough, you can make it super customizable. By default, it doesn't have the extensions activated in Fedora, and it doesn't have the tweak tool to make those kind of minor modifications. But once you add it, you'll be good to go. So they're both pretty customizable. It's just that KDE Plasma is much more customizable, much more. You can do basically anything you want in that thing because KDE Plasma is awesome. Gnome is good too, but KDE Plasma is awesome. Although real quick, just point something out. This was the old meaning of the name Gnome or Gnome. That they dropped that years ago, decades ago. I don't remember when they dropped it, but it doesn't mean anything now. It's just Gnome or just Gnome. It doesn't actually have a meaning anymore.
Another DE. A DE is basically the visual part of interacting with your computer. It affects how it looks and how it feels. And Mint Cinnamon, what I used before, worked great out of the box. But honestly, it was a bit ugly. The menus weren't sleek or streamlined. It looked like something out of the year 2000. And I want something for 2025 and onwards. So
it's actually kind of fair because the Cinnamon desktop environment is kind of like a hybrid of modern but old style. So it's modern in a way, but it's also old in the sense that it has the layout that would maybe even remind you of maybe not Windows 98, but XP had a similar style layout. So it's a pretty old style of like having the menu layout in a way where you have the categories and that stuff. But at the same time, you know, some people like that. So it just depends on your preferences. And that's the whole thing about Linux is that you have so many different options and so many different choices that you'll probably have something that's going to fit what you want. And if you like a super fancy interface that has like big buttons and all that sort of stuff, then yeah, Cinnamon might not be the best option for you. And maybe Gnome is. So it just depends on the preferences. And I feel like there's so many different options for distros, there's so many different options of desktops, you'll find something.
let's just go with the complete opposite of Mint, with the beautiful workstation. Part of me was hesitant to move forward with the installation, not because I thought it would be hard. I've done it before. I'm usually a practical person. I don't usually want more or better or even the best. I don't own a ton of shoes or clothes, and I buy old refurbished tech. If Fedora doesn't work out, I would just be wasting a week. But there was something else that scared me. What if I actually do want more and I want better? And that's why I'm looking to Fedora and other distros. Is what I have just not enough for me? What if I wasn't as practical as I thought I was? Now, I pushed those questions away and I continued anyways. Installation seems fairly simple. I've done it before. There are 4 potential download links, but which one do I get? That's when I remembered a ton of advice I got from my previous video where the audience said to use ChatGPT for tech help. Now, I'm a little skeptical of.
Okay, so first, she was talking about how that there, you might have the worry of getting too involved in it and that sort of stuff. That is actually a worry because there's a lot of cool stuff and there's a lot of stuff to try. And just because you enjoyed one distribution and it works for what you want, you might get the itch and urge to test out other distributions. And that's called distro hopping. And there's also, there's a joke about Distro Hoppers Anonymous, where people get addicted to distro hopping and they want to try a bunch of different distros and that sort of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with it. If you enjoy trying out different OSs. There's plenty in Linux, so you can do that for a long time and still find new stuff. So it is kind of fun. But at the same time, it also can take a lot of time away from doing other things. So I can see why people would be a little bit concerned in that sense. But I think it's fine. As long as you don't do it too often, maybe do like once a week. Don't do it once a day because it could easily take over your time. But the mention about ChatGPT or any kind of AI chat, you absolutely can use those for some things. Like there are certain times where you ask questions that are very specific and it can answer those. But if you ask broad questions like what's the best distro, it will just output gibberish, like just nonsense stuff. And that's pretty much all of them do that. Or the best desktop is the same kind of thing. If you're asking a question that's very generic or broad, it's not going to really do that well. But if you have a question about something very specific that you run into an error or that you are wanting to do a certain type of function for, whatever tasks you might want to do, they are quite useful for that, especially if it's like command line stuff. If you want to learn command line stuff, it can help you with that quite easily. So it just depends on what you're asking to them.
Using AI for most tasks, but it is pretty good at browsing the internet and looking for answers. So between the 4 ISOs, x86_64 is the one to download. It said to use this if you have a regular laptop or desktop from the last 10 to 15 years, which I do. And like before,
that's true, because also those are the really only options you can anyway. The other options are not for desktop or laptops. The ARM is for like Raspberry Pis and that sort of stuff, or anything that's ARM based. And PowerPC, almost no one is going to have a PowerPC. It's possible. If you have a really, really old MacBook or a really old iMac, then you might have PowerPC. But it's very rare that anybody has PowerPC in like the consumer world, because most of the time you're going to see that in like mainframes and whatnot.
Or I had to verify the authenticity of the ISO file. You would think that I already knew how to do this, but I struggled a little bit more than I would have liked. But I got it done. Next, Fedora comes with a media writer. Ooh, that's easy. I can just download the software and then load the thing up to my boot drive. Unfortunately, it didn't work on my MacBook, so I ended up using Balena Etcher again. At this point, I was pretty glad that I had
I'm very interested in like what the error she got was, because Fedora Media Writer is a very good it's a very good tool, but maybe it wouldn't work in certain cases. But I've never used it on a Mac, but I've used it on Windows and Linux, and it's pretty solid. So I'm very curious why it wouldn't work.
Previous experience with Linux, or this would have been a lot harder. Afterwards, things went relatively smooth, like life was finally on easy mode. I put in the command.
Actually, I want to point out one thing. She said that it'd be a little bit harder if she didn't have previous experience with Linux. And I think that is a good point, because when I talk about beginner-friendly distributions and stuff like that, I have a video, I even have a playlist about like what distro to start with. Once you start, then you can choose whatever you want because you have at least a little bit of experience. And now, I still tell people in the very early stages to stay away from Arch or Gen 2 or things like that, because those are like the hardcore stuff. But you can then choose many things if you want, if you are not satisfied with whatever your first pick was. Because all I say is that the beginner should use something that's more beginner friendly. Because once they get comfortable with using Linux, then it's okay if they're using something that is, not necessarily beginner friendly, because they won't run into the same kind of headaches. They've already, learned a little bit about the Linux platform, and that makes it a lot easier to deal with other distributions. So when I say people shouldn't use certain distros or whatever, I'm only talking about the very new beginner who's not a tinkerer and that sort of stuff, because it just makes it a lot easier to get involved in like getting past the first barrier. Because once you know the information, or once you have some experience in using Linux, it's a lot easier to pick up other distros.
In the terminal to go to the UFI menu with system, control, reboot, firmware setup, and off I went. And it was just beautiful. Beautiful isn't even enough to describe it. It was breathtaking. The colors were vibrant, the date and time was dead center, and it looks like everything I had wanted in the world. Installation was simple. There were 4 steps. I went all in and did a clean, full install, erasing all traces of Mint Cinnamon. And when it was done, I felt like I was transported in the future. Mint felt like a dinosaur. This could be endgame. But is it just a pretty face, or is...
Well, actually, if you want Fedora that looks nice and has dinosaurs, you can check out Bluefin from Universal Blue because their whole motif is dinosaurs. So, just anyway.
Is there actual substance beneath the surface? So Fedora even gave me a wonderful tour, although it wasn't very thorough or that helpful for that matter. I learned...
Yeah, that's unfortunately the Gnome's welcome tour. It is very limited, and there's a few benefits to it, like the overview button. It's good that they have that because by default, there's really no indicator that there is an overview or a menu. But so it's good that exists, but it's very limited.
About the overview button, which is like the spotlight, the dock, and the mission control all in Mac, and all those features had a baby. Now, I didn't understand it at the time, but the overview feature gave me great power. And with great power came great responsibility too.
Naturally.
There was something else that felt off, a real strange feeling, like where was the minimize and maximize buttons? Where are my desktop icons? And where is my dock? What is going on? How do I even use it? It's way different than anything I had used before. But first things first, I had to download OBS to record my screen for you. So
before she gets into that is something that is kind of funny because I think that is important. And by default, Gnome just has the top panel and everything is inside the overview. And there are a lot of people who want desktop icons and a lot of people who want a dock and that sort of stuff. And I understand, but by default, Gnome does not have those, and you will need an extension to activate a lot of things. And there's one thing that I don't like about the way that Gnome does stuff. If you go to their homepage and you look around for the extensions, you'll notice that they don't mention them at all. It's not there at all. It's not in the bottom section of it with a footer where you have like all the links. It's not there either. So if you didn't know that extensions were a thing, you wouldn't know how to get them. And also, you wouldn't know that they were separate on a different website and all that. So it's just, I don't like that part. I highly recommend that Gnome integrates the extent. If you're going to have extensions, let people know that they exist. Let people know in an easy way that they can get them. They can modify stuff. But yeah, so let's go back to the video.
Opened up the terminal and typed what I knew. Sudo apt install OBS-studio, like on Mint, expecting it to magically download and install the software for me. But surprise, Fedora doesn't work like that. APT doesn't exist in Fedora. Apparently, instead of
That's
APT,
true.
I'm supposed to use DNF, which did not finish. After consulting ChatGPT,
That is an interesting way of looking at the name of it, because DNF, yeah. When I first heard DNF, I also thought something similar, and it's that is pretty funny.
I replaced APT with DNF, and boom, once again, I was an elite hacker. But then I remembered something else. In my last video on Linux, I thought that you had to install programs using the command line or else it wouldn't update properly. And thousands, and yes, I actually mean many thousands of comments, told me to just use the software manager. So let's find that. Fedora.
Okay, so I'm not surprised there was a lot of comments. I also said it in my first reaction video, so I added to those thousands, I guess. But I was more just surprised when I said it. But this is something that some people do think that the command line is very important and the terminal is necessary and all that other stuff. You don't really have to do any of this stuff. Because a lot of times they'll see people talking about how Linux is so hard because you have to use a terminal and all this other stuff. You don't actually have to. It's just there's a stigma around Linux that has been around for a very long time, because if you go back 20 years, you did have to. These days, that's not a problem. Actually, if you go back 15 years, it might even have still been a thing. But I don't remember when the first, I think it was 2009. Actually, maybe. I don't remember when the first app store came out on Linux. We've had repositories for a very long time. I think like 2001, but those were still, not beginner friendly in any way whatsoever. But anyway, a lot of people think that the stigma of needing to use the terminal is a thing. It hasn't been for about 10 years, but it's very common to think that.
Fedora has a beautiful software manager called Software. It's pretty obvious. Apparently, the software manager is just a visual representation of the exact same thing that I was doing in the command line. They're not.
That is correct. Also, that's Gnome software. They call it software because Gnome decided that naming things should be the most generic way they do it. Like you can imagine. So the Gnome's file manager is called Files. It's actually not, which is funny because the Gnome file manager is actually called Nautilus in the back end for the code and the packages, but on the front end, they just call it Files. Not the easiest thing to search for tips about, If you were just searching for Linux files, good luck with that. Or whatever. So I'm not a big fan of that style of naming things. I get why they're doing it, but I'm not a fan of it.
Separate things like I had thought. Now that I can record my screen, here's where the real challenge starts. Making Fedora work for what I want it to do. That means 1. Connecting it to my laptop dock and monitor setup, so I can have multiple monitors and a real desk setup without using just a laptop. 2. Customize some keyboard shortcuts, swap out left control and left alt. And 3. Get back my minimize button. 4. Change how I access the overview feature for the same way that I use Spotlight, and make minimizing windows easier and enable window snapping. Then go on an entire week without going back to my Mac. Easy enough, right? I love how beautiful Fedora is, but can it be functional too? Is it all looks, no personality? Now I can find out if Fedora can actually replace my Mac or not. So first, my laptop dock. Let's plug it in, fix some problems, because let's be real, there's no way that this would just magically work out of the box. So neither my monitors or the dock works, which I had expected. But for the dock, I knew the exact fix already, and it was simple. I just had to authorize the dock in my terminal using bolt control list and then authorize. The downside is I have to do this every single time I reboot my laptop. It's a real pain in the butt, but alas, it's a security thing and I'm not going to turn that off. Next, the monitors.
There might be a way to script that, but yeah, you shouldn't have to do that. That is annoying, and doing it every single time you boot
is the difficult part. The software that my monitor hub uses is called DisplayLink and only has a Debian-based driver, which works for distros like Ubuntu and Mint, but not Fedora. This was the first step where I felt like a true beginner again. Fedora looked simple in the beginning, but is support for it more limited than Mint? We'll see. But I'm sure there's many people out there who, like me, wanted to use multiple monitors with their Fedora laptop. This, however, was not as easy as my previous problems. I read a bunch of forum posts, consulted ChatGPT, did a bunch of things in my terminal, and nothing worked. Disappointment overshadowed my every action as I tried more and more potential solutions. If I couldn't use my monitors with my laptop, I would be forced to set it aside as an after-work computer. But for some reason, I suddenly felt the urge to just restart my computer, which magically fixed my problem. I had no idea what I did that worked, and I don't think I'll ever know. It's like when your TV stops working back in the day and you just kick it a couple times and then it works. So yay, I did it. I can't help anyone else.
There's times where I have solved something and not knowing how I solved it, because then I would try a bunch of different things and then reset whatever it is that I'm doing, and then all the changes, I don't know which one of the changes actually caused the fix. That sort of thing happens, which is kind of a problem. But in some cases, like that CalDigit dock, I feel like that dock might have it has issues because of the display link. There are ways to get display link to work in Linux, but it is not intuitive. I totally understand that would be a problem. But I feel like Fedora does have display link support. It just might not be as clear out of the box, because I don't have a display link thing that I needed to use for Fedora, so I don't really know personally. But I do have a display link device that it's on the way, so I will be able to try it. So we'll see in a future video.
with this problem, but at least I solved it. Solving problems felt like leveling up, like I'm finally past the noob stage. I understand the terminal better, I'm comfortable using it way more than before, so I was off on my merry way with my docked setup. Now for all of the settings. At Fedora, it's clean. It's very clean. There's virtually zero bloat installed. There's barely any programs, and customizing it is so easy and so.
There's zero bloat and also very few programs. Yeah, that's true. Bloat is not really a thing that's in Linux anyway. You know, like there are extra applications you might not use. Like if you don't use an Office suite, some distros will come with like LibreOffice or something like that. So that might be excessive to some people, but for the most part, you're not going to get bloat regardless of what distro you pick. Now, there are some distros that are probably like, you know, out on the edge, like the skirts of like the universe of Linux, and there might be something. I'm not going to say that none of them do, but 98% or whatever are going to have like zero bloat in the context of like what you would expect from a Windows kind of machine. So I feel like that's a funny comment, because I don't think that any Linux really technically has bloat, but you will see people in the comments talking about one distro is bloated compared to the other, and what they mean by bloat is usually very different from what someone else means by bloat. You know, like, you know, just having an extra application you don't need is automatically bloated in some people's opinions. So I don't know.
Fun. I went through each setting and just set it up how I wanted. My displays, Bluetooth, even my notification settings. And wait, what's this? A built-in screen time feature with movement breaks? I've got to turn this one on. My Mac never cared.
That's kind of cool that she's talking about that, because that was just added in the last version of Gnome.
About me like this, and maybe I need this. I need to take breaks. Finally, an operating system that just cares. Most of my other work enhancements were simple and built into the settings, like changing the overview to Alt Space and swapping left Alt and Control. I did have to download a program called Tweaks to bring back the minimize button, but it also came with some.
That's what I thought. It's kind of unfortunate that by default, the certain functionality that Gnome does, like I think Gnome is great in a lot of ways. It is definitely a very pretty desktop. It's very nice looking, but there are things that I don't think is a great user experience. There's no need, technically speaking, for they say that there's no reason to minimize it, because you can click it on the overview and the button in the dock and have it minimized that way, or you know, there's other ways to do it, or maximize button you don't need because you can double click any time in the title bar. I've heard people say that sort of stuff. And it's just like, if people want to use it, why not have it, that kind of thing. But to not have the feature to be turned on in the settings app, I do think that is a mistake, because of, you know, people like Betty and other people who are, you know, used to seeing that, and just for no reason, it's not there. And it's also the same thing with system notifications and like the system tray app indicators. Gnome also doesn't have those, and you have to install an extension to get those. Same thing with desktop icons and et cetera. So I'm not a big fan of that part, but Gnome is pretty good.
Something I didn't know I needed, that you can middle click to minimize and double click to maximize. Now I don't even have to go and press the buttons. I can just press my mouse. It's so efficient. It's so
she actually has the double click thing that, and so that actually is available in Mac OS too, for those who don't know. So you can double click. The middle click is definitely not there, but the middle click, I think you have to turn on. I think she did turn it on. But there is actually a lot of cool stuff you can do in different desktop environments, like with KDE Plasma. If you right click the maximize button, it will. Now I don't remember if it's exactly which direction it goes. I'm pretty sure that if you right-click the maximize button in KDE Plasma, it will expand it or maximize horizontally only. And then if you middle-click it, it will maximize vertically only. And if you regular click it, then of course it just fully maximizes. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with window management in Linux.
Window snapping built in. You just hover your windows until you see a purple shadow and then just snaps. It's beautiful and it's practical. The only problem, maybe there's more later, is when someone else uses my laptop, they have no idea where the menus are, how to open programs or files or anything. It's not like the overview button is intuitive, but once you use it, it's hard going back. Now my desktop is just clean. There's no programs, no apps, no docs, no menus, just pure wallpaper. There were a couple more things I needed to work though. Discord Discord and Notion. Discord,
I guess she's saying that Gnome's right in that context, that maybe not having everything there is good. Interesting. I don't know if I agree with that, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting for sure. I feel like there should be at least some button that's visual, like the top left having a button. I think that they made the workspace switcher identifier also an overview clicker, but there's no indication that that's what it is. So, but anyway, maybe she's coming on the side of GNOME at this point.
I downloaded through the software manager and it was a bit buggy, actually very buggy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, so I just bookmarked the browser version. The same thing with Notion. It doesn't offer Linux support, but it has an online version. So before I get to work, let's address the last.
So the thing about Notion, I've never used it myself, so I don't really know. But the Discord thing, I have tested Discord in various different ways. And for me, the Flatpak version of Discord works great. So every time I need the to install Discord, I always use the Flatpak version, and it's pretty solid. But that maybe it's different for other people.
Last possible elephant in the room, gaming. Last video, I tested out gaming on Mint and it worked, but I don't really think that's necessary. I game on my Steam Deck and never on my laptop anyway, so it wouldn't even be practical to install games on it. So work was going well. I got used to my entire setup with my laptop and it felt natural and easy. Then something crazy happened, something that I didn't expect to happen. Midway through the week, I upgraded my CalDigit TS3 to a TS5 Plus, but unfortunately, it didn't support Windows Thunderbolt 3 laptops like my Dell XPS anymore. So I went back to my Mac for a bit to test a new dock, and that's when I realized I missed it. I missed Fedora a lot.
Oh, that's awesome.
The look, the feel, even the features that I looked for on Mac to make it like Fedora, I couldn't find, and I was officially converted. But I also did.
That is fantastic news. I love that. When I was first reacting like, uh-oh, because you're getting a brand new, because that dock is made specifically for Mac. It feels like anyway. They have support for Windows too, but I feel like it's made pretty much for Mac. There are some that are exclusively for Mac, but I feel like that is like their main focus. So when she said that she upgraded, I was kind of worried because like if the first one wasn't working and it's had years of being out and people trying to get it to work, then the new one is gonna have some issues. But you know, in that sense that she did have the issues, she realized that she really liked Linux and Fedora. So that's awesome.
Didn't want to give up my Mac either. I mean, the thing was $600. I'm not just going to push it aside and throw it to the curb. I take great pride in running the items I own into the ground. But maybe Fedora was just an initial infatuation, a mere short-term crush. It's just beautiful. Or could this turn into something more? The more I used it, the more I could sense some of Fedora's weaknesses. The first is that it took a toll on my laptop's battery life, especially compared to Mint. All those streamlinedness, the sleek transitions, the beautiful desktops, it comes at a cost, and that cost is battery life. So while Fedora is elegant and smooth, it's much hungrier. When I'm not plugged.
Well, it also depends on how you're doing it, because you might not be activating the power profiles, because in the top right, I'm pretty sure in the top right, they do have access. They have a little quick menu in GNOME where there's a choice between like the battery mode, so you can, or performance mode, so you can change it to balanced or battery efficient. I forgot what it's called in terms of like power saving mode maybe. So there are options there, and if you choose the power saving mode, it will make the battery last longer. But you know, it still might not be as much as you expect. But at the same time, GNOME is one of the heaviest desktops available on Linux. It is very pretty looking, but it also is one of the heaviest. So that could be an issue as well. But it is also worth noting that there is no way that they're going to compare like the difference between M series Mac with, you know, any particular Linux distro. The M series Macs are very good on battery. So if you have one of those, you will lose some battery life in that sense. But at the same time, you can save some battery depending on how you know, what configuration you have and that sort of stuff.
Plugged in, my battery life can drain from 100% to 0 within just a couple hours. But also keep in mind that this laptop is a couple years old and it was already having battery issues before this Linux journey. So I guess it's like a zombie revived from the dead. But while I would love to make this my main PC, it's a little difficult. I would have to lug around my awkward Dell chart.
Before she gets into it, I just want to tell you a quick story. There was actually a time where I had someone who wanted to keep their laptop running, and they had a laptop that was very much like on its last legs. It was literally falling apart. And I don't mean like figuratively falling. I mean literally falling apart. The hinges were very broken, and they were still using it, still trying to like be super gentle with it when they closed it and all that. It was very, very much on its last leg. But it's also a really old laptop. And they asked me to put Linux on it because it would make it where they could keep using it. And I'm like, sure, you can keep using it with Linux, because they heard about the fact that it was a way to keep something continuing to run that wouldn't work really well on Windows. So I did put Linux on it, and they used it for a bit. And then about a year later, I heard from them, and they said that they got a new Windows machine. And I was like, no, they said they got a new machine. And I said, oh, did you put Linux on it? They said, no, because this one is really, like, Windows is so fast now. I'm like, wait, what? They said, yeah, Windows is faster than Linux. And I had to stop them for a second and say, okay, what you're telling me is that you bought a brand new machine with brand new hardware, which is much more advanced, and it's using the operating system. And you're saying that operating system is faster because of the operating system. It could also be that you're using a brand new machine with advanced hardware comparing to something that is literally falling apart. And then they said, oh yeah, you're right. So it does matter what the kind of hardware comparison that people use. But at the same time, she's just talking about different battery stuff. So it could be an issue of the hardware. It could also be like the battery is, older and that sort of stuff. But it also could just be the configuration isn't as optimal for that piece of hardware, because some hardware works better on Linux than others. So there is that too.
Charger everywhere, while my Mac can accept most USB-C chargers. Working with Fedora is simple. All I have to do is browse the internet, use Notion and Discord, and it has everything I need. Now, I definitely don't regret giving it a try. It's been a great experience. Mac has more versatility for me in my day-to-day, but that doesn't mean I won't be keeping Fedora either. I'm 100% sure I like it better than Mint. So right now, my Fedora laptop is my main work laptop. It's not attached to the dock, but it is attached to my monitors and a keyboard and mouse Bluetooth setup, while my Mac is my more portable at-home laptop. Well, how the turntables. And I've customized both laptops to make them similar, where there aren't any workflow disruptions if I switch from one to the other. I love it. But now I have another question that's been lurking around. If this is how I feel about my second Linux distro, what if the next one is even better? What if there's something out there, something more?
I told you about the whole, you can get addicted to the distro hopping. There's it can happen. You got to be careful, okay? You got to be careful.
More beautiful, more streamlined, and more functional. I can't help but wonder. Mint really was the gateway drug, getting me into Linux in the first place. But Fedora, I think I could stick with this a while. While I'm pretty new to Linux, I think I need to stick to this one for a while. But truly, I can't help but wonder what the next step of the journey is. Or maybe the best distro doesn't exist. But for now, I found something
that is correct. It does not exist. The best distro for you can exist. You absolutely can find a distro that works perfectly for what you want it to be, but there is no one single best distro for everyone. So that part is, there is no such thing as the best distro in general, but you absolutely can find the best distro for you and what you want. It does require a little bit of testing though.
That works, and that's what matters. So if you've been afraid to get started in Linux, don't be. It's actually super fun and an amazing educational journey. And if you've been a Linux user for a while, I'd love to hear your journey through Linux. How did you start? Where are you at now? And if you're interested in my Mint Cinnamon experience, watch this video here.
I agree with Betty that it is absolutely a great thing to get started with, because you're going to enjoy it most of the time. Not everybody, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of people, most people are going to enjoy the experience because it's fun. You get to have a whole new experience, a whole new operating system, and it is fun to play around with that sort of thing. As far as her question about my story, I'm actually going to make a more in-depth video about it, but I'll give you a quick, small synopsis. When I first started with Linux, it was nothing like it is now. Nothing like it is now. So back in the day when I started, I was a teenager, and this was 99, and Ubuntu didn't exist. Everything based on Ubuntu didn't exist. Fedora didn't exist at the time yet, and Arch didn't exist. Gentoo didn't exist. A lot of stuff didn't exist yet. So I had a very different experience when I first started, and it was different than you might expect. I actually enjoyed it. It was a little chaotic, but I was a tinkerer back in the day. I'm not really as much as I was then, but I'm still a little bit of a tinkerer. But it was fun because I got to make things work that weren't really supposed to work with this operating system and that sort of stuff. So this was a whole other kind of experience, and I don't recommend anyone do that now. You can technically do it if you wanted to go for like the super hardcore distros. You could do what I did. I just don't recommend it. So on behalf of the Linux community, I would like to welcome you, Betty, because you are now a Linux user. You're talking about keeping to use Linux around. And by the way, just for those who are curious, you don't have to be only using Linux to be a Linux user. If you use Linux and Windows, you're still a Linux user. If you're using Linux and Mac, you're still a Linux user. As long as you enjoy it and you keep wanting to use it, then you're a Linux user. So, Betty, welcome to the Linux community, and you are now one of us. And if you're watching and you're brand new to the Linux platform and Linux ecosystem, and you would like to become one of us, then go check out the video I made about getting started with Linux and how to pick your first distribution. And also maybe check out the playlist I made about getting started with Linux, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I think would be really useful for many people. And if there's stuff about Ubuntu and Fedora and all sorts, so check those out. I'll have them linked in the description, as well as, in the end screen right here. Wait. I pointed that way. They're going to be right here.